The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I was sitting at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, trying to convince myself that the morning was just ordinary. But ordinary had long fled from my life. Ever since the divorce, everything had felt like a half-remembered dream, a world where I didn't belong anymore. Then my son spoke. His words shattered the fragile calm. "I don't want you as my mom." Time stopped. The steam from my coffee curled in the air like mocking little snakes. My heart stumbled, skipped, fell. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand he tell me it wasn't true. But he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before: detachment, certainty, a quiet cruelty I had not imagined he was capable of. What did you say?" My voice came out strangled, almost foreign to my own ears. I said, "I don't want you as my mom." It was clear. He had made his choice, not for a day, not for a whim, but as if he had decided this weeks ago. And in that instant, I realized that the person I had trusted most, the little boy whose tiny hands once clung to mine in the dark, was already slipping away. I had thought the divorce hurt me the most, that his father, my ex-husband, with his cold detachment and careless charm, would leave the deepest scar. But no, the truth was, the real wound was this: the betrayal of someone who had once called me Mom, with love in his eyes. Later that day, my ex-husband called. His voice was casual, even cheerful, as if nothing had ever happened between us. "So, how are you handling the divorce?" I froze, handling it. That was his way of reducing years of love, shared laughter, sleepless nights, and shattered promises into a polite, passing conversation. My first instinct was to snap, to let the bitterness tear through me and lash out, but I didn't. I smiled gently instead, the kind of smile that can hide a hurricane. "I'm managing," I said softly, letting the words drip like honey, deceptively sweet. There was a pause on the other end. Maybe he sensed a change, maybe he didn't, but I could feel the seed of satisfaction already beginning to sprout, tiny and fragile, in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't going to let him see the storm inside me, not yet, because heartbreak, I realized, had a power of its own. A quiet, simmering power. Pain could be a forge, and I, broken, yes, but not defeated, would shape it into something unbreakable. I looked at my son later, his small figure hunched over his toys, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to weep, to plead, to explain that I was still here, still his mom in every way that mattered. But instead, I said nothing. My silence was heavy, a gentle rebuke he didn't understand yet. Inside, I began to make a vow, not loud, not dramatic, but ironclad. This wasn't the end of our story. He had tested me, and he didn't know what he was awakening. I would endure. I would heal, and someday, when he, or my ex, saw the strength I had forged from this betrayal, they would understand what they had lost. For now, I let the quiet storm rage inside me. The world outside carried on, unaware of the wreckage of love and trust I was navigating. But in the shadows of my grief, something else began to grow. A patient, gentle, unstoppable determination. And it would not be long before it whispered back, soft but unyielding, that revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles. I learned quickly that the world didn't care about my heartbreak. It moved on without waiting for me to gather the pieces of myself, and neither did he. My ex-husband, so casually destructive, seemed almost proud of the chaos he'd left behind, unaware that I had begun to change. I wore my grief like a mask, but beneath it, something fiercer was taking root. Every interaction with him became a lesson in restraint. When he called sometimes with that same infuriatingly light tone, asking how I was managing, if I was seeing anyone, I smiled. A gentle, almost serene smile, the kind that made people underestimate the depth of your awareness. Inside, my heart was simmering, but my voice remained soft, almost honeyed. "I'm doing well," I said once, when he tried to corner me with questions about the divorce settlement. He laughed, a shallow, casual sound, certain I was still fragile. "Good to hear," he replied before hanging up. I placed my phone down and exhaled, feeling the pulse of satisfaction that came from silence well kept, emotions controlled. This was the first lesson I was learning. The sweetest revenge wasn't loud, it was quiet, calculated, invisible until it struck deep. Days passed, and I threw myself into routines I had long neglected. Work became my refuge, my sanctuary. I spent hours on projects, meeting people who respected my mind, my drive. I learned to dress not to attract attention, but to reflect the woman I was becoming, strong, composed, untouchable in ways he could never predict. Even my son noticed. He watched me with those eyes that were beginning to see the world differently, a mixture of curiosity and caution. I didn't force affection, didn't beg for closeness. Instead, I let him witness me standing taller, speaking with confidence, laughing without hesitation. Slowly, subtly, I became someone he could respect, someone he might even miss without realizing it yet. I also began observing my ex-husband. His arrogance, his careless charm, once infuriating, became tools for my strategy. I learned his patterns, the way he underestimated people who didn't react to him, the small vanity that could be pricked with nothing more than my serene composure. I started attending gatherings, reconnecting with friends I had drifted from during the marriage. Each conversation, each smile, each small triumph shared or silently observed was a quiet assertion. I was not broken. I was not defeated, and every night after my son had gone to bed, I would allow myself a private smile, not bitter, not vengeful in the ugly sense, but sharp with the awareness that this control, this quiet reclamation, was mine. My life, my happiness, my power, and he would see it someday, whether he realized it or not. Because revenge, I understood, was about more than anger. It was about transformation. It was about becoming the person he could not diminish. The person my son could eventually remember as strong, unwavering, and unshakable, even when he had wanted to push me away. I was still grieving, still aching, but in the silence of my home, in the controlled rhythm of my days, I was learning to turn that pain into something exquisite. A force he couldn't touch, a presence that would quietly, persistently, remind him of everything he had taken for granted. I smiled again, gently, catching my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the one who had curled into herself at his casual cruelty. She was sharper now, steadier, wiser, and utterly unstoppable in ways he could never anticipate. And somewhere, deep inside, I knew the storm that had begun in heartbreak was growing into something much more powerful. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits quietly, in smiles, in successes, in the calm after the chaos. And when it arrives, it is unforgettable. By now, the world had started to notice a change. Not the kind that shouted or demanded attention, but the kind that quietly made people take stock. I walked into rooms with a calm confidence that drew glances, not for vanity, but for the unspoken strength radiating from me. My ex-husband, of course, noticed first. I could tell from the way his voice faltered when he spoke, the way he hesitated before asking the usual polite questions that now felt inadequate. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, brick by brick. Work became more than a refuge. It became a triumph. Projects I had once feared taking on now became opportunities to shine. Each small victory was a quiet declaration. I was not defined by the past, by the heartbreak, by the casual cruelty of someone who had once claimed to love me. I noticed the subtle ways my ex tried to insert himself back into our lives, unaware that he had already lost ground. He called to ask about bills, schedules, even my son's school events. I answered politely, carefully, each word measured. I never let him see the stir of anger or the ache that still lingered. Instead, I let him glimpse success and serenity, things he could no longer control, things that belonged entirely to me. The real victory, though, was with my son. Slowly, imperceptibly, he began to notice the changes too. He saw me laughing again, really laughing, and not just the half-hearted smiles of someone clinging to memory. He saw me stand up for myself in ways I never had before, articulate my needs, and navigate the world with intelligence and grace. One evening, he came home from school and watched me from the doorway as I worked on a presentation. "Mom, you're really good at that," he said, almost as if the words surprised him as much as they did me. My heart caught in my throat, but I smiled gently, letting the warmth of his acknowledgement seep in. I didn't push him to say more. I simply let him see me, and in turn, see himself. It was in these moments that my revenge truly blossomed, not in confrontation, but in quiet transformation. My ex-husband could witness my happiness. My son could witness my strength, and both could feel the sting of what they had dismissed. They couldn't touch it, couldn't diminish it, and in that inability lay my power. I began to embrace new experiences, expanding my circle of friends and reconnecting with passions long buried. Dinner parties, exhibitions, weekend trips, they were subtle showcases of a life full and rich, untainted by his absence. Each laugh shared with friends, each confident stride down the street, became a quiet reminder that I was no longer the woman he had underestimated. When he tried to comment on my life, I would smile gently, eyes calm and steady. "I'm happy," I said once when he asked if I missed him. That simple phrase, delivered without bitterness, carried more weight than any argument, any accusation I could have thrown at him in anger. Even my son began to change. His heart, confused and hurt, started softening toward me. He noticed the patience, the love, and the resilience I carried without complaint. Slowly, the walls he had built began to crack, and I knew that the truth of our bond, stronger than his confusion or fear, would reveal itself in its own time. And so I continued day by day, victory by quiet victory. My revenge was not loud, it was not explosive. It was sweeter, more enduring. It was the knowledge that I had reclaimed myself, that I could love without fear, laugh without hesitation, and live without waiting for approval from those who had tried to diminish me. In every gentle smile, in every moment of calm control, I was reminding them I was still here. I was stronger than they had ever imagined. And nothing, not even betrayal, could ever take that away. The day he came to see me, I was calm. Not just calm, but radiant in a way that seemed to make the air around me lighter, warmer. My home smelled of fresh flowers and baked bread, the sort of comfort he had once taken for granted. He didn't know what to expect, maybe regret, maybe anger. But I was neither. I was simply myself, fully and unflinchingly. He looked at me and hesitated, as though the years of ease and control he had assumed were suddenly slipping through his fingers. I wanted to ask," he began, voice awkward and unsure, "about the divorce, about everything. How did it get to this?" I smiled gently, the kind of smile that carries both sorrow and serenity. "It got to this," I said softly, "because I finally stopped letting anyone else control my happiness." He blinked. The words were simple, yet they carried weight he hadn't anticipated. The woman he had once dismissed, the woman he had thought fragile and dependent, had not just survived. She had flourished. I watched him carefully, observing the subtle shifts in his expression. There was guilt there, yes, but also awe. And somewhere in that mix, a quiet understanding. He had underestimated me as he always had. Then my son appeared in the doorway. He was older now in ways more than just years. He had grown observant, thoughtful, and a little wary. His eyes met mine, and I saw the flicker of recognition, the realization that I was still his mother, his protector, his guide. "Mom," he murmured, hesitating. I didn't understand before, but I see now, I see you." A gentle warmth spread through me, more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. I knelt, opening my arms, and he came forward. No words were needed. The embrace itself carried apologies, understanding, and the slow, steady rebuilding of trust. I turned back to my ex-husband, who had been watching quietly, unease etched into his features. He said nothing. Words would not undo the lessons he had learned, the quiet, unshakable proof of my strength, my resilience, and my happiness. "This," I continued, voice calm but firm, "is my life, not yours to control, not yours to diminish. I have learned to protect it, cherish it, and grow in it, and that's something you cannot take away." He swallowed, the weight of reality pressing down on him. He had walked away thinking he could leave chaos behind, but now he saw the consequences. A woman transformed, a son reclaiming his mother, a life that had outgrown the shadow of his indifference. And in that moment, I understood the sweetest truth: revenge doesn't have to be cruel or loud. It doesn't have to hurt anyone with sharp words or bitter confrontations. It can be gentle, patient, enduring. It can be the quiet triumph of living fully, loving openly, and reclaiming every part of yourself that was once lost. As I watched my son laugh softly beside me, I felt the storm of betrayal finally settle into something fertile, a garden of strength, patience, and love. He had doubted me, even rejected me, but I had endured, I had grown, and I had returned not as a woman broken by heartbreak, but as a woman whose joy, serenity, and resilience were irresistible proof of everything he had lost. I smiled again, gentle and serene, and for the first time in years I felt free, free from pain, free from bitterness, free from the need for their approval. The ex-husband left quietly that day, carrying only the echo of my calm triumph. He had asked about the divorce, unaware that the real story was not in legal documents, but in the life I had reclaimed, the love I had nurtured, and the subtle, enduring revenge of a woman who refused to be diminished, and I, finally, fully, was unstoppable,